Jackie Coban, referred to affectionately as an iron fist in a velvet glove, is passionate beyond belief about making sure that self awareness is demystified once and for all. She's a life coach and a personality coach, Enneagram Coach. She's a dynamic, out of the box thinker and champion for personalities who believe they are limitless. Her passion is simple: helping people craft their own narrative with the right language, tools, and insight to enjoy their human experience and live their dream life as themselves. Jack is a heart centered giver with a remarkable sense of purpose. Her down to earth approach provides a safe space for the reformer, the giver, the achiever, the individualist, the observer, the guardian, the enthusiast, the challenger, and the peacemaker to take their places at the table, whatever that means for them. She's an obsessive learner and avid question asker who firmly believes everyone's personality is dying to shine through and dominate the world. They just need to be asked the right question.
Hello, everybody. I'm so pleased to have here with me today for the Healer Hub podcast, Jackie Coban, who is a life coach and a personality and Enneagram coach. Hey, Jackie, happy to have you here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited. And I've seen you face to face twice now over video, and your hair has looked gorgeous both times. And I had to say something on the microphone because I was like, your hair is so wild and beautiful. So jealous. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for that. And I was thinking about you and how you have different personalities depending on the way that you are wearing your hair. So
Yep.
it's a hair day. Yes.
The hair day.
Okay. So who are you, Jackie, and what is your background story?
Sure. So my name is Jackie. I live on the East Coast in the United States. I live in New Jersey, just 8 miles outside of Manhattan. And my story in terms of how I got involved with personality coaching and life coaching is I found myself in a similar place that most people, but I'll say most women find themselves in every now and again. And sometimes it's like a theme in their lives, but I got to a place where I was hitting rock bottom. I was at a crossroads. And when the only person around to speak up for myself was me, and I didn't have any language to describe myself, I had no concept of who I was. How would I stick up for myself? I didn't know what I wanted or what I was living my life running from, protecting myself from. And I realized there was a bigger responsibility to myself. And that's where it started. Long story short, I was working at a job that burnt me out. And was like, I'm my responsibility. And so I started looking into the Enneagram in terms of personality. And it's funny, when I first looked into it, I like put it down for 6 months because I was like, this feels embarrassing and I don't want to look at it anymore. But it was the best thing that I did. And so that's my story and how I got started. I've been studying the Enneagram for over a decade, and I've been using it in my coaching for the last 5 years, and it's been incredible.
Mm-hmm. So, can you introduce us to the concept? Because I'm pretty sure that not a lot of people know what it is about. I heard about it in different, spiritual circles. But what is the Enneagram system, and how can people actually use it? How is it helpful for people?
Yeah, no. So it's funny because I first heard of it in a neutral circle, and then I heard after. I was like, oh, it's involved in different spiritualities, different religions, different neutral modalities. So it's kind of cool because it doesn't really belong to like one sect or pocket. But basically, what it is personality typing. And after I say that, I'm going to remove the word personality from it, and I'm going to say it's your essence. And the reason I make that distinction is your personality is what you do out loud, but your essence tells you why. And that's what the Enneagram measures, quote unquote. So if you do something like Myers-Briggs or something from Carl Jung like that, you get essentially how you see the world and how you can explain yourself to the world, but you don't really get your why, you know? And so what the Enneagram does is it, on a larger scale, it breaks people's quote unquote personalities down into 9 main types, all having a core fear, a core motivation, and a core desire. Something that it's our who, what, and why. Why do I do this? Who am I? When do I do it? How do I do it? Why do I do it? And from there, from the 9 main personality types, there are so many variations. There are hundreds of variations because humans are complicated. But basically, it helps us to understand why we do what we do. So, number one, we have more control over what we do. And number two, it helps us to open our eyes to see the different things that we feel like we're running from, we feel like we need protection from, we feel like we need to excel in or whatever. But in reality, there's very little from which we need to be protected. And those lies are stopping us from living our lives. And so, what the Enneagram does is it sheds light on who you are right now and who you are supposed to be and helps you get there.
That's great. It seems so clear, and I'm thinking, wow, who wouldn't want to know their essence and then just find a way to move forward in life? You mentioned the 9 personality types. Can
Mhm.
you summarize? And then you mentioned that each of them has a fear and a pull, a desire. Can you
Yeah.
mention just like very briefly each one of them, knowing that in the link notes, we will also have access to your freebie where we can see everything written down very nicely
Yeah.
and concisely. Mhm.
Absolutely, yes. So, I'll go through them 1 through 9. They all have their nicknames. I'll go through them, but it's typically just 1 through 9. So, Enneagram Type 1 is called the perfectionist or the reformer, and they are ethical, very principled. They've got a right way to do things, and there's a wrong way to do things, and they are the judge of that. And so, for them, they have to fix and reform their environment because they feel it's a reflection of themselves. And that's how they live their lives. Type 2 is called the helper or the giver, and they are warm and interpersonal. They're really good at meeting other people's needs, not so good at meeting their own or even recognizing that they have needs. And their core fear is that they are not just unloved, but unlovable. And they feel that helping or giving earns them that spot. The type 3 is called the achiever or the performer. And this type, I mean, go for the gold. They are highly competitive, like dressed to kill. They are sharp. They are CEOs, like they are go getters. And for them, there's a very, very blurry line between where their achievements end and where they begin. And because they don't know the difference between that line, it's just go time in achieving for them. Type 4 is called the individualist or the tortured artist, which I think is so funny. And they are, I make this joke, they don't just do feelings or have feelings, they are feelings, negative, positive, everything in between, every spectrum of feelings that you could feel. The type 4 feels them in a day. And for them, they want to find significance and identity and individuality in what they do. And they want to leave their print. They want to know and understand that the world sees them as special as they feel. Enneagram Type 5 is called the observer or the theorist. I think theorist is kind of fitting, but they are 100% cerebral. They're the best person to call if you're comparing cars or computer models. They're very, very by the book, very factual. And for them, they go through life doing 2 things. Number 1, managing their energy so that they don't get run out and depleted. And number 2, collecting all of the knowledge and all of the information that they need to help them survive in the world. Type 6 is called the loyalist or the guardian. And there's very important reasons for those names. Loyalist because you're in their loyalty, you've got it. You've got their loyalty for life. Guardian because they're a bit of the guardian for the rules. If you know someone who rings the alarm because they love people, something's not right. This person is off. Something's going to happen. Who can think of the end from the beginning? They're probably a type 6. They're the type of person that lives in code yellow all the time. I always say that. It's never a red light, it's never a green light, it's just always kind of in the middle. Type 7 is called the enthusiast, and they're kind of like the Peter Pan of the personality types. They are fun and exciting and excitable, and they want to share joy and they want to bring joy. They want to have joy. For them, they like to move from one thing to the next very quickly, mentally, projects, fun things. They're thinking about the next vacation when they're boarding the plane from the last vacation. And that is because they don't want to get stuck where they are because that might be very painful. Type 8 is called the challenger or the contrarian, and they have this need or desire to be against. And for them, it's not that they want to appear that they're strong or they want to appear that they're rebellious or different than everybody else. It's that they really need to make sure that you see they're not coming off as weak and they cannot be messed with and they cannot be challenged even though they are doing the challenging. And that's their goal. They don't want to be blindsided and they go through life that way. And type 9 is called the peacemaker or the referee. I prefer peacemaker, but referee's great because they're really good at mediating. But they are go with the flow. They're warm and they're the sweethearts of the Enneagram. But they unfortunately find themselves in a lot of confusing situations and inauthentic relationships because they go with the flow in relationships to avoid conflict as much as possible. And then they wonder if people around them really know them. And so those are the 9 types in a nutshell.
So listening to you, first of all, I was like, oh my God, she really knows this stuff and she's like really passionate about it. And secondly, I was like, it's easier for me to tell you which ones I am not because it seems
Yes.
that I am ticking pretty much
Oh,
everything apart
yeah.
from 2 and 5. Like 2 and 5, kind of not, but everything else,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. It's very interesting because when I First of all, the healthier you are as a person, the more likely you're going to see yourself in all of the types because humans are not one dimensional unless we are in fight or flight, right? So that's a great thing for you. I will say when I first looked into the Enneagram, I don't like the online tests. I'm not a fan. They've gotten better with the years, but I typed as a type 6 and I was like, not really. Like, I feel like most people in America have anxiety and would all type as a type 6. So I put that on the back burner. And then I took it again and I typed as the challenger. And I was like, I don't think that's me. Like, okay. So I saw myself in a lot of them. I was like, I kind of see myself in all of them except 5 and 7. That's what, or excuse me, 5 and 9. I was like, oh, I see myself in all of them except 5 and 9. And when I came down to doing my type and how specific it was, I felt like someone was like ripping my clothes off in front of me and was like, guess what? You're naked. That's what it felt like. So like to have similarities. And I think that's why it's so important because let's say you and I'm a 2. You said you didn't relate to the 2. So let's say we're 2 different personality types. We walk into a room, we might both be warm and want to have our environment love us and love our environment back and have a little bit of attention and give a little attention and all that stuff. But we have very different motivations and reasons why we do that. It fills 2 different cups in us, you know? And so I think understanding the motivations helps us separate the things we have in common with everybody else.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm wondering, was it any type for you that you felt that it completely doesn't resonate with you? Sometimes I'm thinking that the things that we most resist are actually the things that probably hold some sort of truth.
So, yes and no. I remember reading the description for the Enneagram Type 3, the achiever or the performer. And because it's next to my type as the 2, sometimes I can borrow inspiration. Same with the 1. I can borrow inspiration from the 1. So I very much went into denial and was like, I don't have anything in common with the 3. I'm not a performer. I'm not an achiever. I don't need to show up as something. I don't. And I was like, yeah, you're lying to yourself, babe. You definitely want to show up as something you're not sometimes. So I'd say yes. Like I've had those, and even in the beginning, I was like, I'm definitely not a 9, but I had no feelings towards it. I just knew I wasn't. The 5, I had feelings towards it. I was like, and I think I realized in hindsight that personality of person, because they're very cerebral and I'm very emotional, maybe was like a hard triggering point for me. So I was like, I'm definitely not a 5. I'm not a 5. I'm not a 5. I'm not. But as I've studied over the last decade, 5 is one of the types that I'm like, am I this? Because I'll still wake up on a random Wednesday morning and I'm like, oh, I'm definitely a different type than I thought I was. And then after an hour, I calm down and I stop having a crisis. And I'm like, nope, you are who you've always been, babe. Like, it's fine. But yes, I think the phrase that comes to mind with that question is something I say to my clients is, what I see in you exists in me, or else I wouldn't know what it was. And so anything that I've seen in the other personality types where I'm like, that's not nice. That is I'm like, oh, yeah, I probably do that too, don't I?
Yeah, and that's really great awareness, right? Because I think that it's so difficult when you recognize it so bluntly in other people and you can really judge it and tear it apart in other people. And I'm like, yep, I probably have it. I do not want to admit to it, but yeah, it exists somewhere
Absolutely.
in me. Okay, so how about if I wanted to know who I am, and you said that you don't really resonate with the online tests, then how are you helping people, or what kind of process are you taking people through so that they know which type they are?
Yeah, so I will say there's a lot of practitioners you can meet with, and they'll tell you your type through a series of different ways. I know some people The reason I'm saying this is because you don't have to work with me, right? Some people will send you a test and then just go over the results. I wouldn't recommend that. What I do is I break down people into one of three groups first, because all of the personality types can be grouped a little bit. And the easiest one to group is, are they a heart type? Are they a head type? Or are they an instinctual type? And so, for example, I'm part of the heart types. And yeah, I follow my instincts, but I am part of the heart types. Um, let's say my sister or my brother or something might be a head type, but regardless of what that is, I can narrow it down from 9 to 3 by figuring out, where do they operate? Where do they tell stories from? Where do they receive information? What is their physical, emotional, mental response to things? Which center of their body, maybe it's their mind, which one goes in the back burner during stress? All of these different things help me to point to the 3. I can narrow it down. And then from there, I start asking some questions about what's normal, but what's the exception? What's the everyday thing, but what comes up from it now and again, and helping to separate the characteristics from the essence, or the habits from the motivation. So someone could completely present like one type, but be very, very motivated by the core fears and drivers for a different type. So essentially, in the 90-minute session where we're going through their type A to Z, that first part of it is I'm just asking them a lot of questions about themselves, and listening intently for their motivations, for their language, waiting and going, oh, why did you say that question like that? And just being able to be a mirror back to the other person, to explain, to clarify. That's something that an online test will never give you, no matter what you're testing for. And so from there, usually clients will come in with a list of goals. I want to do this. I want to make money. I want to have friends. I want to get a boyfriend. I want to get married. And we look at their core motivations, what they really aligned with, and we go, okay, is this really our goal, or do we have a step 0 before our goal? And they're like, oh yeah, I definitely have a step 0. My goal isn't to make friends. My goal is to learn why I'm very skeptical of everybody. Okay, got it. So it kind of changes. I'll use my fiance's phrase. It Windexes the mirror a little bit. It cleans the mirror a little so you can see yourself more clearly, and then you can have your dream life. And so it's one of those things where it's a lot of questions, it's a lot of effort, and it's a lot of investment in yourself. This type of modality is for people who care to invest in themselves through time and patience. But holy crap, does it change? If you met me even 5 years ago, you'd be like, I have no idea who this person is. No idea.
Mhm. I'm curious about this, what you just mentioned, because of course I have a lot of things that are kind of bombarding my mind now. What I heard you saying firstly is that sometimes people can have a goal, right? And it's interesting because you mentioned the ones that are usually on everybody's mind, which is find love, make money, find my purpose, and have a community. And then what you mentioned was that you have this goal that sometimes can be also overwhelming, right? Or like it can be really difficult to see how you approach it. And then you help them identify the first step, right? Like what is actually, right? And gain clarity through their, I heard you say motivations and then essence, which is such a beautiful way of putting it, because I think that everybody longs to be seen and loved and appreciated for their essence. But that's something that I imagine it's very intangible for most people. So to have a modality that actually says, "Oh, this is what it is. This is what your essence is," and for them to recognize themselves, I imagine that it's extremely powerful and healing.
It is. It's also, it can be a little intimidating. I will say one of the hardest parts about personality study was coming to admit that everyone's personality, myself included, is just a coping mechanism. I'm coping from something, I'm hiding from something. When I step into my essence, it's uglier, it's messier, it's less staged, but it's more authentic, it's more me. And I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. And I struggle to say the word happy because that's a fleeting thing. I like to say the word joy because that I feel like is such a rooted feeling. But the truth of the matter is it's not that I don't have anything to cope from. It's that the things that have scared me the most, motivated me the wrong way, the things that I thought that I needed to be protected from are not factors anymore. And so I feel like I'm a person that can presently deal with life as it comes and live for my dream life every step of the way without thinking to myself, what do I need to be protected from? Because the truth of the matter is, as we're adults and we step in, our only goal is to live an authentic dream life for ourselves that we're going to be proud of at our deathbed. And so when you take a step to the side and go, yeah, there's very little from which I need to be protected right now, including all this shit that I thought was really important at 8, we're okay. We're going to be fine, And so, yeah, I think connecting with your essence, it's one of the scarier but more beautiful and more important things to do. You asked an interesting question, like who wouldn't want to do that? I think the answer is everybody. I think I think the answer is everybody because they're like we ourselves are even hiding it from us. I remember, one of the funniest things about these typing sessions is there's a lot of denial in them. Denial in the sense that like they're like, I don't really do that though. I'm like, okay. And like we'll start talking and they're like, oh my God, I do that. I do it just looks different. It's in a different color, it's in a different outfit. But all that to say, I think the answer is nobody. Like it's very scary. We hide these things even from ourselves. But when you hear this information, when you hear these things about yourself, when someone is finally able to give you a why, you can look the other way, but you can't pretend you didn't hear it. You can't pretend you didn't know. And so it's that funny disparity between it's a journey that like nobody wants to really go on, but once we have the information, we can't say no to it. Once there's a little bit of like, I can authentically be me. I can understand like self-awareness can actually speak a language I understand and it's not woo-woo and scary and super psychological. I can actually speak it and understand it. Yeah, okay, I need it. I can't say no because this is the answer to my question. Is there more? This is the answer to my question. What was I made for? This is the answer. Like, so it answers these questions that like beckon inside of us. Is it the most enticing thing? No, it's not sexy. It's scary, but it's very, very worth it because it tells us about ourselves. And as we learn about ourselves through the modality of ourselves, it becomes a joke when somebody tries to tell you about you. It's like, no, you don't know me. I know me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And of course, I mean, once you kind of step on this self-development process and different people choose different modalities, like I'm really curious about this modality because I can feel it in you, like it's so present and it's screaming through the screen. And we will go into your story because I'm curious about that. But it's never an easy journey, right? Like all the aspect that what you're mentioning, you created a personality to cope with the truth that you didn't want to admit and to look in the eyes. And then at one point, all the things that you were kind of using to hide from that are no longer making sense. And then you are at a crossroad and you need to decide, like sometimes people decide to continue in another way with other distractions and you can go like that forever or I don't know, for many reincarnations. I believe in reincarnation. Or you could just say, you know what, like it's gonna hurt like hell. My ego, that aspect of me that doesn't really like to be fully honest is not gonna appreciate it very much. But what if I'm gonna be able to live a more like a free life and more in alignment with something that I intuitively know that exists and this calling to be seen and to kind of be allowed to drive my life.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I think about it, like I think of it like any wound. Like getting a shard of glass in your skin hurts and getting the shard of glass taken out of your skin hurts. Pick your pain. You need one of them, right? Pick your pain. Do you want the pain of the glass staying in your skin or you want the pain of the glass like leaving, right? And so it's funny throughout, I'm almost 30. I'll be 30 in a couple months. And I've been doing this business for such a long time. You'd think that I know everything about I don't. And it could be a random day of the week and my fiance who doesn't know tons about the Enneagram, will expose a behavior to me that I'm doing and it fits the bill. And I'm like, damn it, you study this stuff. Like you study this for a living, like get it together. But the truth is it has to just be a shame-free roadmap because in that moment I could go like, no, or I didn't mean it. I could say, like this is a tendency that I do when I'm panicking. I just need like 10 minutes. I need to figure out what I'm panicking about, like all that stuff. And it doesn't solve your problems. It doesn't exempt you from suffering. It doesn't exempt you from getting a wound when something hurts, right? But it gives you the ability to start repairing connections within yourself, and facilitates the understanding behind it. Because there's something that understanding and accountability do when you have them hand in hand. And when you use the Enneagram for yourself, there is accountability and understanding. And when you use the Enneagram within your relationships because you use it on yourself, it impacts the understanding and the accountability in your relationships. And so it's one of those things where it's like, what is it like? Which would you rather, the pain of growing or the pain of staying the same? I'd rather the pain of growing. I would.
Yeah, I love it because I'm listening to a lot of Alex Ramosi these
Mhm.
days, and this is what he's saying, right? Like, what are you willing to sacrifice?
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm really curious about who you used to be.
Oh my God.
And as much as you feel safe to share, and as much as that feels comfortable or aligned at this moment for you, but basically you are the person who knows best where you started from, and you also mentioned what you were hiding from, or like what you are using as coping mechanisms, and who you are today. So just a brief peek into your personal
Yes.
journey.
I think I can do this. So I will say one of the important things about the Enneagram is you have your main personality type. And one of the ways to know you're in fight or flight or out of whack is that you start to act like the unhealthy version of almost your opposite personality type, right? So the 2 is the giver, the helper. Super, super warming, very flattering, very charming. That's who I am. And when I'm in stress, I take on the attributes, all type 2s take on the attributes of the challenger, like very opposite people, very, very opposite people. And so I will say that from a very, very young age, I was in fight or flight for many years. Like I spent most of, like, I want to say 90% of my life acting like a type 8, right? In character, in characteristics, in behavior. That meant that because of my fight or flight, or because I was hiding from myself, which I'll go into in a sec, I was more aggressive instead of warm. I was more dominating instead of loving. I was more manipulative. I was a twat. Honestly, like, I was not a nice person. I was one of those people that would step on anyone or anything to get and feel loved. Now, we know that fabricated control is not real control. The type 2 fears that they are unloved, that they are unlovable, and mostly that they're just tolerated by everybody around them. And I felt that. I still feel that at times. Like it's a resounding I don't belong here. And everyone is appeasing you to make you feel like you belong here, but you have to earn your keep. And I would remember, like, so my motivations never changed to be loved or to be lovable. And I would do that by helping and by giving. But because I was in fight or flight and I was borrowing from the challenger, the way that comes across is incredibly boundary crossing. It's rude, it's aggressive, it's impatient, it's getting mean and showing teeth when people don't take your advice. Like when you think of the most pure version of who a giver could be, and when you it's like you put on a not a label but an idea on them that they are doing this from survival, it's never going to be pretty. And so it was not pretty. It was a mess. And I was part of like a nonprofit world where I was helping people. I was helping people 24/7. And I was like, this feels like a natural extension of myself, but it doesn't feel good. And my cup is empty. And I feel like I'm mean. I don't recognize myself. And it didn't, it felt weird because even when I was doing things that were a natural extension of myself, a natural extension of my gifts, it felt wrong because my motives were not in the right place. And I don't mean my motives to give, I mean my motives and my outlook on the world, which is interesting because people tend to say, like, what are your motives when you're doing XYZ action? But we don't ever say it, like, how do you see the world? How do you think the world sees you? How, all of that. So, to give you a small glimpse, I find myself now being able to tap into the parts of the challenger when I want to. So instead of, yes, I am a warm and giving person. But when I see somebody who I love and who I've cared for being disrespected, there's something in me that rises up to challenge and to protect them through love. So it's like I'm still able to tap in and to find that inspiration from the challenger, but I don't constantly feel like I'm trying to measure my lovability and my worth by giving anymore. So now that I've taken that out, not all the time, because we're not perfect, but when I take that out of the running as the main motivation for my life, I can really see who I am. So having the book opened for me, essentially having my eyes opened to what does the type 2 struggle with? Well, it struggles to feel loved. And I have to be honest with myself. If I don't feel like I'm needed or useful in a room, I have a really hard time. And instead of making it propel me to the sink to show off by doing dishes, it makes me stop and go inward and go, why do you need someone or anyone's attention right now? Why do you feel like you have to be like, what is happening in this room that makes you feel like you need to earn your keep or earn the love or whatever? And so instead of reacting from a place of the absolute opposite of my personality, it gives me a second and the authority, the power, the ability, the control to step back for a quick sec and go, what is like my coping mechanism actually telling me about what I think is happening in this room right now? And it's been the most powerful thing. So long story short, short story long, I don't really know, but that's the story in a nutshell.
Yeah, I love it. It made me think also of shadow work and how it seems that each type has not a shadow type, but just a type that exacerbates the hidden aspects or the repressed aspects. So this is what I was hearing you mentioning with you being a type 2. And then I imagine it also type 2s are the people whom usually other people take advantage of because they are so giving and so open. So then you do need that conscious type 5. This is where the line this is where the line
Yes.
is.
Yes. And that's the thing, right? Is if you're a type 2, you have it in you to tap into the challenger, right? The same way that we all have gifts and abilities, but they're just like muscles. Those muscles atrophy without use, or they get stronger with proper use, with proper exercise. And so it's one of those things where it's like you learn it over time, but you're able to tap into all of these different things. Like I tell people, I'm like, when you can manage your motivation, you're going to be managing it for the rest of your life. It's okay. It's going to be okay. But when you manage your motivations, the things that you thought stopped you in life or held you back in life, they're usually going to end up being your superpower. Just watch. And that's what it is. Those things that people told me my whole life, you're so aggressive, you're so this, you're so that, and now that I've worked on myself and become this healthy version of me, knock on wood, right? I feel like I can combine my natural ability to love people and to help them do what's best for themselves with my ability to sometimes challenge people through love. And it's like, okay, I'm practicing and flexing the muscle. My muscle is not dying because I'm not it's working. The muscle is working. It's not a reaction. It's not a protection. It's not a coping mechanism. I'm using it because I can and because I'm allowed to be a multidimensional human being. But I got to deal with my core motivations and my fears that keep me blind, like with blinders that keep me one dimensional. So, yes, we all have things that we hide in, hide behind, hide under. Um, but you said it earlier and you said it best. Like we're all really dying to just show up as ourselves. All of us. Even the people that want to hide, they want to hide and be known and seen as themselves, maybe just not in public on display. But everyone does. Everyone wants to be known as themselves.
It is really interesting what you mentioned also. It was your story, right? Like the type 5 behavior was the truth in that moment. So even if you were most of the time type 2, which is your essence, then the type 5 would come, because I think that everybody kind of wants to also display the aspects that are not yet integrated and to be loved for those aspects too. It's I think it's a part of the human nature. I I I am very skeptical about people who display only the desirable aspects. I'm like, something is really off there.
Yes.
Yeah.
No,
Okay. So
totally. And so, yeah, go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, so yeah, 2 does go to the 8, but every number has their number that they go to or borrow from in stress. And so like that same concept applies to everybody. We end up being someone we can't even recognize under stress, but with help and with practice, we can be someone we recognize, just the angry version of that. And that's okay.
Mhm. So which are the types that combine?
Oh, like which types like go well
Yeah.
together?
Yeah. As in you
Oh,
type 2 and type 5 are like when type 2 is out of alignment, it shows up as a type 5 in its less desirable
it shows up
aspects,
as a
right?
type 8. Yes.
As a type
So it'll
8. Mhm.
yes. So the 2 will show up as an 8 when it's under stress, but every single type shows up as a different type when it's under stress and when it's healthy. So I'll use my type as an example just to save on time, things like that. Everyone can do the research, but um, when the type 2 is healthiest, they borrow from the individualist, the type 4. And the reason that's so important is because 2s are very people focused and very focused on meeting other people's needs, we don't say what we're feeling out loud. We don't like to talk about what we need or if we're in pain or if something's going on or what's going on in our hearts because that makes us less available to people, right? And so even though I don't necessarily want to be available to everybody, that's something I still have to deal with. So when I am comfortable to fully express my emotions, like the type 4, they have this huge capacity for depth for emotions from A to Z. Um, I know it because I'm like, oh, I'm in this healthy place because I feel, for example, with my fiance, I feel most at home telling him what I need, telling him how I feel, telling him how something may have affected me because I feel healthy and safe with him and I can tap into that part of myself. And so every type borrows inspiration when they're stressed, when they're healthy. But if you think about it, it all kind of resounds around this whole thing of I just need to be someone I'm not for right now. I just need somebody else to get the job done. And we all kind of want someone bigger, stronger, faster, better to come save us. And when we go to a certain type in stress, that's what we're hoping for.
Mm.
We're hoping for someone who isn't ourselves, but we know it's going to be us to come in and scoop us and save us, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, it's almost like an archetype, right? That you you
Yes.
use Sasha Brave just to go through the concert and show up as the entertainer that you may not yet be.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned that the first session with somebody is when you have the talk and you ask them all those questions. I'm curious about how does it evolve? So you mentioned also that maybe sometimes you need a lot of time once you start this journey and kind of an idea of once people want to start and they are curious about their Enneagram typology, it starts with this initial conversation and then how can it develop? And also, what do most of your clients, are there recurring themes that people
Mm.
come to you for?
Yeah, I will answer the last question first. So, the common themes that people come to me, and the common themes are all over the map, but they're just about anything that you could think of relationships, money, debt. I don't know how to manage. I feel like I'm going out of control. One of the big ones recently is I don't feel like I'm the main character of my life. But I will say that they are the one thing that they all have in common. All the things that people come to me for are people come to me because they feel like what they're coming to me with, their goal, their problem is the biggest, most important thing, or is the thing that's going to, if we remove this, it's not going to hold me back anymore. That's the thing that everybody has in common. We all have this thing where if it's like, oh, I just need Coach Jack to like remove the obstacle and then I'm good. I can do this. So that's that's the most common thing, but people will come all over the map. Essentially what happens is we'll talk and we'll say, okay, what are your goals? And I had this conversation with someone the other day. She said, I started a business. I feel really accomplished, but I'm having, number one, I'm having a hard time balancing being a parent and a wife and having a business. It's number one. And number two, she said, now I'm making all this money and I don't really know how to manage it. And I don't really know where to start. And so I said, okay, here's what we'll do. We're going to go over your personality type. We're going to go through it A to Z. We're going to understand where you fit. What part of the personality and the archetype, the key traits, the characteristics, the motives, what parts speak to you? Where have you seen them throughout your life? Where do you see them presently? Where did you see them start earlier in life and continue on? on to presently, right? We're laying a little bit of a foundation for, well, why are we where we are now, right?
Mhm.
From there, I go, okay, so this is the type of person you are, and this is the type of spending you do, but you want your finances here. Okay, based on who you are, now again, I'm not a financial expert. Based on who you are, these are the type of goals, habits, and tangible things that you can do to start understanding how to keep and make your budget. You want flexibility in being a wife, a mom, and a business owner, but let's say, for example, this person's a type 3, the achiever. So whatever they're doing, they're just trying to give 3000% because they think that if they win or they achieve, it means that they are loved or lovable. And so they're getting burnt out and they don't have time to be a wife or whatever the case is. So we're going to work on showing up and being loved as a person outside of your works. So maybe step one is we're going to start a hobby that you're not very good at, right? It sounds silly. Um, but essentially what it is we take your real goals, we understand your personality type and what fits, and we ask, okay, are the goals still the same? Is there step zero? And sometimes they're still the same. So we go, okay, now that we know who you are, my main package is usually 3 months. I do like month to month as well, but 3 months. In these 3 months, we're going to learn. It's like learning yourself boot camp. That's number one. Number two is we're going to get your goals to be as concise and specific as possible. And number three, we're going to set you up in these 3 months so that one day when you don't need me, want me, and when this 3 months is over, you're reaching that goal by yourself. Not with me, not with my help, not because I did it for you, but all we're doing is setting up the systems. And let me tell you, sometimes we get to like the end of the second month and we haven't even touched the goals, but just because we've started working on the Enneagram stuff and understanding where do we fit in this, where does my motivation fit, some of those goals start working themselves out. Like I had a client who she said, I need to make friends. And I said, well, why don't you have any? And she said, oh, I don't have time. I said, okay, no problem. She ended up being a type 6, very skeptical of everybody. And as we started working through the type 6, the skepticalities, where did that start? How does that continue in childhood? How did that translate to when you were dating your husband? Blah, blah, blah. By the end of the second month, she already had a friend group that was starting. I didn't talk to her about making friends. So I'm surprised to find a lot of my clients' goals work themselves out. And so what I decided to do is I'm going to spend our 3 months together laying that foundation. It's getting to know yourself boot camp. It's laying the foundation for a sustainable you-based process and how to move forward. And then a lot of clients, I call them the graduated clients. They do month to month with me. They'll check in. They'll check in sometimes just on WhatsApp. We do like a once a month WhatsApp voice note, things like that. But that's essentially where it is. It's very individualized and specific because that's the only thing that's going to stick for them. That's the only thing that's going to stick for anyone.
Hmm. I love it. When I hear you speaking, ever since we started the recording, I just have this feeling that it's so clear and so transparent that people instantaneously must trust you and the process because it's just so tangible, like there is no fluff, there is no woo. It just
Yeah.
makes sense, I think, for the heart and also the logical brain. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's it does make sense. It does make sense. But the beautiful thing about it is you don't have to make everything make sense for you. Sometimes, it's funny. I find people who are not my repeat clients to be some of the best because they'll come in for that one-time typing session and I will maybe say the one phrase, the one sentence, like the one thing in the whole 90 minutes that was like, that's it. That's the one. That's what I'm missing. Thank you. And literally that was what they needed. And it was like, oh, having clarification around this one part of why I do this gave me everything I needed to take it and run. And that's okay. That, some people, I would have been that person that needed the 3 months and then the month to month, but would have eventually eased out. That's okay. And whatever the case is, like, as long as you know that whether you make it in this world authentically or you don't, whether you show up as yourself or you show up empty, um, there's going to be a mirror in front of your face. So you might as well learn that that person's with you forever And you might as well learn to love that person and learn that you are that person's guide and nurturer. That person that you look at in the mirror is essentially the adult version of your inner child, and assume they've been locked in a room for a long time and they need a hug and a little bit of attention. That's really what it is.
Mm, mm. I had this visual of, I think that so many people struggle with this. It just feels that we have this tangled thread inside. And what you mentioned about this client who got that one thing, and it's in that basically you together co-creating the pulling of that one thread, and then the whole the
Yeah.
whole mess just fell apart and just like,
Yep.
okay.
There it is. My
Yes,
whole world,
yes.
my whole reality. A lot of that's a lot of what it is. It's a lot of it's like, wait, I'll never forget my dearest best friend from college, who's still my best friend. I remember going through her type with her, and when we talked about her type and we talked about one very specific trait that only exists in that type, and I remember being like, "So this is something that all of your personality type struggles with." And she was like, "Wait a second. That everybody doesn't have that?" And I said, "No." She's like, "So you're telling me that people exist in this life?" Like, the one thing that I was talking to her about was, one of the personality types, the perfectionist or the reformer, has an inner policing system. Um, and it's not just about right or wrong or anything like that. It's like an inner parent. Anything that you do, you wanna do, you feel like doing, you might say, they're ready to say something to you about it, about how everyone's gonna hate you. And she looked at me, she's like, "Not everybody has that?" And I said, "No." She's like, "You don't." I said, "Well, there are times where I'm like, ah, they're gonna hate me if I cancel. That's just a regular thought." And she's like, "Yeah, I don't have regular thoughts like that. They're like assaulting." And I'm like, "Yep, that's it." So it's funny because we sometimes it's that one line, it's that one thing that just shatters. Like, I remember um reading, people could have told me this my whole life, but when I was reading about my personality type and read the understanding that, like, it's not me meeting people's needs that makes them love me, it makes them need me, and that's not what I needed at all. That was the one sentence that literally that thread that you were talking about, it was like that one string that undid the whole knot. And I was like, "Wow, I have a 40-mile long string and not a single concept about how the world really works. I've got some work to do." Like, you know what I mean? So it's funny because sometimes that one sentence, that one thought, that one thing just untangles something that we all thought was really our worldview for all this time,
Mm, yeah,
you know?
100%. What is your biggest life dream at this moment, and how does it relate to the kind of work that you carry out?
What a lovely question. One of the things that I would love to do is I would love to, my biggest dream right now is to cater to people who don't do well face to face. And with that being said, like, I want to create courses on the different types. I want to create courses on, that's my biggest dream, is to create courses on even the different instinctual variants of each type. You know, as a two, I could be a self preservation two, a social community two, or a sexual intimate two. Um, and I think those things make all the difference, right? And why two people do the same thing, are motivated by the same way, but look different. So something like that, courses on different things, that's my next dream. Because there are a lot of people who are information people, and I respect that, but I'm really good at face to face, and I want to speak to, and I think this information is valuable for anybody who learns anyway. So my next dream, my next goal is to maybe put this down on paper and sell it as a course, or even gift it to people. But that's my next dream.
Mm. Now, as you were talking, I thought about, is this something that you can change your type, or is it something that you are born with or conditioned into, or
So I like to say it like this. I think a lot of things fall in this category, but genetics loads the gun and environment pulls the trigger, right? And so you are one type, you're always one type. Your type doesn't change. You either manage your motivation or you don't. Your behavior and that's how you evolve throughout life as a person. But your characteristics regarding your type and your motivations will kind of see where you're at with managing them or not. But you don't really change. So if I'll give you this example, if I embarked on this journey tomorrow and I said, I need to be the healthiest version of Jackie, I'm not going to become the healthiest version of my mom or my brother or my mailman, even if he's the nicest person in the world, right? I have a threshold of what's incredibly healthy for me and what's incredibly unhealthy for me. And that's the scale I'm going to grow with it. And it's not about me putting me in a box. It's just that if you could be anybody, how could you be individual, right? So that's, that's that. But and you asked me another part of this question. Oh, your type doesn't really change over time, but you can grow. You can borrow inspiration from other types and things like that as you go through life.
Mm, yeah. What do you find most rewarding in the work that you do?
I don't think there's anything scarier than feeling misunderstood, because being misunderstood for people translates in different ways. But for some, it's you don't know me. For some, it's you don't trust me. For some, it's that you don't understand where I'm coming from. So being misunderstood by others is like the bane of our existence. Everything we do is to be seen and understood by others in a specific curated way. So to be misunderstood by your own self is an even bigger pain and detriment and heartbreak. The most rewarding thing is when I start to see the light in somebody's eyes when they start to understand themselves. I remember, I'll never forget, one client looked me dead in the face. She's like, "So I'm not crazy?" I said, "No, you're not crazy." And that for me, like, I felt like it broke me. Like, she had just told me about XYZ, her and her husband not being able to see eye to eye, and him going, "You're crazy," and this and the other thing. And for me to like legitimately have language for the who, what, and why, and for her to be like, "Oh my God, I'm not crazy." Like, no, you're not crazy. You want to feel special and you're trying to feel special. You're not crazy, you know?
Yeah, it's really touching because I imagine that a lot of people just want to be seen, like it feels
Yeah.
so special to feel seen and heard by somebody in a session or by your partner, by your friends. So I imagine that that brought a lot of healing to her soul.
Yeah, I hope so. And that's really what it is for me, this did so much by empowering me to take responsibility and giving me the control of what I had control over. We only have control over ourselves. So it's so rewarding to give that to others and to see them take it and run. I some of my clients that I'm seeing right now are some of my first few clients still, and they are like, to watch the growth from A to where they are now. I'm just like, "What? Are you the same person? Are you kidding?" Like.
Yeah. I was wondering also about compatibility, what you just mentioned with this client and her husband. Are there some types that just shouldn't get into a relationship, or is it more about understanding who you are and then it's going to be so much easier to manage whatever relationship you find yourself into?
So it's a complicated answer. So by nature, I don't want to say there are types who don't get along, but by nature there are types that go together really well. Someone like twos and nines, they jive really. They're great friends. Twos and nines and sevens can be great friends. Things like that, right? Great in relationship. However, I always say this: there's not one type that you shouldn't be around, and if you want to know your type to measure who you do want to be around, take some time to withdraw and be around nobody and work on yourself. That's my best advice I could give you. There's a reason my business is called Table for Nine, because having every single type around my table does not minimize me and does not make me a different person. Um, I will say though, there are some types that in their unhealthiest places can fight like cats and dogs. So the first one that I think of, that's the easiest to explain, is like the 4 and the 5. The 4 being this incredibly emotional person, can be moody sometimes, is always on the search for significance and for feeling special. And if they're not at their healthiest, they're going for that in whatever way is necessary. The type 5, who lives in their head, wants a peaceful world without intrusions. If they're not the healthiest, they don't really know how to manage themselves, and they're married to a 4 who needs attention and to feel special, it can feel like a lot. So there are some types that when we're not there are some types that jive really well together, and if we're not healthy as individuals, it's not working. Um, the the goal is that whoever you are, know yourself to a capacity that you can be understanding of others. Knowing yourself and how to explain yourself is nothing. knowing yourself to the point where you can understand others is essentially where it's at in terms of any healthy relationship. And so the answer to that is yes. The answer to that is no. The answer to that is spend some time with the person in the mirror and you don't have to think about who you get along with best.
Yeah. And I'm also thinking that sometimes, we try so hard to kind of understand the world around us because then we know how to become the perfect chameleon or the pretzel, that fits
Yes.
kind of everybody. But it seems that your work is more about becoming so true to who you are and so clear about who you are. Then it's just so easy to manage the relationships because you are coming from a space of authenticity and then also welcoming other people.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean you don't make mistakes. That doesn't mean that
Hmm.
you and your partner are able to get it right every time, that your needs are not going to conflict. Like the type 2, one of my downfalls, and I find this to be true even to this day, is if my needs conflict with the needs of others, I get really frustrated. And I so that doesn't mean we get it right every single part of the time, but it makes me open to when he says there's something wrong. It makes me open. It makes my understanding of myself has even made him more open of like, hey, like, is something wrong or did I offend you? And, it's not vulnerability and transparency are two different things. And a lot of times we have transparency in relationships, but to have vulnerability takes an understanding of ourselves to the degree that we understand the person across from us. So that's really the goal. And you do that if you do that for yourself, you are effectively doing that for your whole world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, who is your inspiration and why do you find them or it rewarding? If it's a kind of a concept or something less tangible.
Who is inspiring? My grandma. My grandma. I think my grandmother is the most inspiring. I'd been thinking about this question for a little bit. I think my grandma is the most inspiring because she's somebody who is not a perfect person by any means. It's the sweetest America's sweetheart, though. Um, she's always been herself, and she's always been herself unapologetically. And like, even when like the whole family will jump down the throat of the little old lady, right? But it's like, stop cooking, sit down, whatever. But when people are coming at her for these little things that bring her comfort, things that bring her joy, she fights for herself. And it's something that she does in such a way that is tasteful and sweet and loving and lovely. And she's like my main motivation for so much because I was like, oh, my sweet grandma, who I'm 5 feet tall. She's a head shorter than I am. She's so tiny. And like she can speak up for herself. And it's because she doesn't care how she looks. She cares that people know who she is. That for me was the most inspiring thing. And like I always known that from a young age, but never really had the words for it until I was in this place where it's like, okay, well, you can live the rest of your life being miserable, or you could be like your grandma. So
Hmm. Have you done her type? What type is she?
I haven't typed her just because I don't know how. She only speaks Turkish, and while I speak Turkish, I don't know if I can translate this like in the same way. But I believe that she's either 1 the reformer or 9 the peacemaker. They're right next to each other, so I have a hard time seeing like I see a lot of the similar behaviors in the 1 and the 9. I just can't tell which one's the main type, like which one is the one that the motivations come from. So if I figure that one out, I'll keep you updated.
100% we're gonna be on our toes just to find out the type of your Turkish grandmother.
I know.
Thank you so much, Jackie. This was really, really nice. It felt really good for me to be exposed also to your energy and to kind of feel my nervous system reacting in a very peaceful and
Thank
grounded
you.
way. So yeah, I'm very grateful for that. Now, where can we find you online?
Oh, thank you so much. That was really I don't think people will know how much that meant to me, that statement about your nervous system. So thank you so much. That meant a lot. Um, people can find me anywhere. I am on Instagram at Table for Nine Coaching. It's FOR and then the number 9. So Table for Nine Coaching. My website is the same, or you can go to knowyourdamnself.com. You'll find me there. And yeah, that's the best way to get in touch with me. I love DMs. It takes me a little bit sometimes to respond. So please allow a little bit of time, but I love DMs. So if you have a quick question or you just want some info, feel free to reach out.
That's great. And everything is going to be in the notes, so they can go there. Thank you, thank you,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Is there anything else that you would like to share?
No, that's all. The only other thing I'd like to share is I was looking at your websites. I was looking at your YouTube channel a little earlier before we hopped on. And I think that like what you do is very freeing and beautiful and empowering in so many different areas. So just wanted to say thank you for what you do, because we do very, very different things, but what you do is needed and I wouldn't be able to do it. And what I do is needed, and I don't know if you'd want to or be able to do that. And so it's like I feel like we need each other. And so I appreciate being on here, but I also appreciate what you do.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And thank everybody for tuning in today.
Amazing news! The Healer Hub podcast listeners get a 50% discount on their Enneagram typing session. Just use the code HHP at checkout on Jackie's website. Enjoy! Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, the best way to support us is to subscribe and share. And if you know anybody who would be a great fit to be featured on the show, please do reach out.